Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint right here on KTN News, and it's about time we start our studio discussion tonight. On my immediate right is Professor Iritumbo, who is a political analyst, and on my far right is Abdikadir Mohammed, who is the legal advisor to President Uhuru Kenyatta. Many thanks, both of you, for joining us here in the studio. Now, Prof, let me just start with you. The IEBC commissioners and their staff are right now at a retreat in Naivasha. It has been a very damaging week for them. I'm sure you've been following the developments from the anniversary tires. Do you think with this kind of retreat, there might be some kind of a light at the end of the tunnel as far as IEBC wrangles is concerned?
Thank you, Yusuf. My reaction to the retreat in Naivasha is a positive one.
Yes.
That they are injured by what has come out. And they have an obligation first to attempt to treat themselves and redeem themselves from the injury by appearing that at least they have made an effort, and there is most likely there are grounds to try and reconciliate among themselves so that they can return to work. Because if they don't do so, are they saying they're going to quarrel at work? So for me, the positive thing is that they have agreed that they have a problem and they're going to try and solve it internally as far as possible, which I really wish that they do. Because it will
the
then
timeline, because we're just a few days to the pause.
Yes, it will make it easier for everybody if they can solve it and agree on the working rules of engagement that they're going to use that work according to the law.
Yeah, Abdikadir, we've seen the memos and the counter memos. We've been talking about that. So many people have been talking about those memos. Do you think this kind of retreat might bring to an end the wrangles that we've been witnessing there?
We hope so. We hope so, because there are two issues. One is that the Supreme Court said they should handle the next election in strict compliance with the law and the Constitution. The other issue was the internal wrangles. The first one was part of the process. By virtue of going to court, the expectation was that they would either be accepting, the court would be accepting the results or annulling the results. The second one is not part of the process. The internal wrangles are not part of the processes of IEBC. And that is really a self-inflicted wound. We hope, first of all, that they sort that out. And secondly, they get down to work, because they really don't have time and the task is Herculean.
And let's just talk about the courts, the ruling that was made by the Supreme Court. We had to get the full ruling. Let's say the full ruling comes out and it names specific individuals who will be responsible for that election on August 8th. Do you think that might take the commission off balance after this retreat?
No, the court, first of all, said the commission should handle the elections. So I suspect by the time they're coming to the conclusion that the commission should handle, they expect two things. Number one, it is the Constitution that has said this is the commission that does elections. And number two, they believe and they agree that the commission is fit to handle the elections. Two, it is rarely unlikely, because there was very little specific evidence about one person or the other. But if, as you say, the court were to come out with some stuff, I am sure the IEBC will bend over backwards to implement what the court says. If the president was willing to say, I'm going to abide by the decision of the court, the commission definitely will also say they don't have a choice. But I suspect that will be highly unlikely. To say specifically X or Y or Z will be highly unlikely for the court.
Prof, especially opposition, they've been very critical about the IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba. Let's say hypothetically that the court comes out and puts, a name on these faces, behind that election on August 8th. Do you think that will also come in and, take these commissioners off balance at a time when, of course, they're in a retreat to understand each other?
My personal reaction is that it would probably not be a particularly wise move to give specific names.
Absolutely.
What I understand and what I believe they should do is that they should be able to point out certain operating areas that came out as troublesome and negatively affected the performance of IBC.
But these areas are operated by people, so I'm sure...
Just a moment. Yes. You can be a person in that area, but be a collateral victim of information or activities of another person. So in my view, it is counterproductive to go for individuals. It is better to go at specific aspects of the process which have problems. And then if there is need, if you realize that some of those people, in cases where there is what I call differential guilt, whereby some people bent backwards to offend the process and others touch the process, although they did not originate and contemplate the negative outcome. Now, every case will have to be treated on its own merit, based on the degree of culpability. I think that
absolutely. And this just to add to what Prof has said, we have done the people issue every time we had problems. Remember in 2008, we went after the people in ECK. We cleared the deck. Last year, again, we went after the people and disbanded the commissioners. I absolutely agree with the Prof. If there are issues the Supreme Court will point out, I believe it will be very helpful to deal with the processes and the legal issues that the court saw as not being handled well, so that the country can move forward in clarifying those issues. The people, we have gone after the people every time.
And once again, let Abdikari just finish on this. It's a question I did ask you earlier as well. The people are saying it's not just the problem is not just with the commissioners, it's with the secretariat as well. So and again, the commissioners who've been changed, and not the secretariat. And
again, that was true last time when we removed the commission. But when we were dealing with the ECK, we actually removed the commissioners, but we also removed the entire secretariat. And we actually went further and said, nobody who held office for the ECK would ever again hold office that deals with elections in this country. So we made it illegal, unlawful for the people who worked with the ECK to ever get work in an electoral management position. So we've done that before.
Yes.
This time, I believe what we should do is look at the process, if at all.
Maybe.
Briefly, before we move on.
Yes, maybe. The problem really is the issue, the question one would raise. These individuals, some of whom may be found to have been culpable in specific areas, were they acting alone or they were acting in collusion with the parties outside the ECK mechanism?
And that has been the subject of discussion for the better part of this week. And of course, the two main protagonists, that is both NASA and Jubilee, have been talking about IEBC in their campaigns. Let's listen into what both NASA leader Raila Odinga as well as Jubilee's leader, who is President Uhuru Kenyatta, had to say.
Hatuwezi kuchukua mbuzi wetu kupelekea fisi ya chunge. Fisi anaweza kuwa mchungaji wa mbuzi? Ataweza? Chiloba hawezi kuwa mchungaji wa kura zetu.
Raila Amolo Odinga, kama wewe huko tayari kuingia kwa debe ambayo inasimamiwa na tume huru ya uchaguzi wa Kenya, weka kando, sisi tuende Kasarani, tuapishwe, tuendelee na kazi ya kujenga taifa letu la Kenya.
You've heard there the President and NASA leader talking. We're going to talk shortly about whether NASA is ready for the election or not, according to President Uhuru Kenyatta. But for now, let's say IEBC goes ahead and prepares for this election, and then NASA makes good its threat of boycotting the October 17th election. So the question is, what will happen next?
So first of all, the election, IEBC is undertaking the election because, number one, it is mandated under the Constitution. It's the only body that can undertake the election. Number two, the court specifically ordered IEBC, which was a party to the suit, go and undertake the elections within 60 days, which is also a constitutional time limit.
Yes.
So nobody else will hold the elections. As to who takes part in the elections, the IEBC will not force anybody to take part in the elections. In fact, the Constitution does not force anybody to take part in the elections.
Yes.
There could be one person, there could be 2, there could be 20, provided they are properly nominated and they are properly on the ballot.
In this case, we have 2 who will be on the ballot. That is President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga.
Yes.
In case Raila Odinga misses out in action on October 17th,
yes.
Don't you foresee a crisis?
Not at all. Remember, in Kikuyu constituency, there was only one individual who was elected unopposed. So those processes are there. The Constitution does not allow, IEBC will not force anybody to be on the ballot. If one of their free will offers themselves and is validly nominated, they will be there. So if NASA decides they do not take part in the poll, there is absolutely nothing constitutionally wrong with President Uhuru Kenyatta moving forward and him being declared.
Prof, as you react to that, the IEBC CEO Chiloba says that he will still play a central role in the organization and conduct of the October 17th general election. I'm sure this is something that will not go down well with the NASA outfit that is the opposition. Do you think NASA is going to make good its threat of boycotting the election?
First and foremost, whether Chiloba is central or not largely depends on his employer. He's not his own employer, so he can't decide on his own fate. Essentially, he's an employee of the commission, and the commissioners constitute the equivalent of the board or the board of directors of IEBC.
And at this moment, they're in Naivasha trying to iron out the issues.
They're trying to sort themselves out so that they can be able to make what I would call proper managerial decisions. Now, as to Chiloba, he's playing, in my view, he's playing a dangerous game. He's playing politics. Because his job would be, it should be, I was given a job, I'm still holding it. When the election comes, I will carry it out. He must not sound the way the president sounds. That's what is worrying me. Every time the president makes a statement and Chiloba makes another statement, intended or unintended, he sounds like they are in sync. That's really what is causing the jitters. Second thing is that the question that you asked, whether NASA will count it as threat, I don't know. That's the first. The second position is...
But the principals are on record having said that they will boycott the election if Chiloba and team are going to participate.
Let me put it this way. These are politicians. Because you can see, here is an example. We want to know the doublespeak from all politicians. President Uhuru Kenyatta accepted the election. Next day, all right, he was out there being very unpresidential. You know, saying things I wish I didn't hear from my president. Now, that is the equivalent of a doublespeak. I don't think you can rule this out in the form of NASA. A lot of these are negotiating positions, the leveraging on whatever there is to see if there is any shift.
But this is giving Jubilee a lot of fodder.
So on the president's viewpoint, first of all, I think the most critical decision required of the president was to accept a very difficult decision, which he honestly did not agree with. And that he did. He said, I will abide by it, and went back to the campaign. He's a human being. He's very disappointed. And he has a right, like any other Kenyan, to give his views, whether they sound presidential to Prof or not. So that is that. The second is on Chiloba. Chiloba is the CEO of the institution. It's actually a constitutional position. The CEO of so he's the chief executive officer. He's the accounting officer, he's the authorized officer. He is central to the elections. I agree with Prof. He is the commission's hand. If the commissioners want to manage this, we don't care whether it's Chiloba or the chair or one of the commissioners. This is one organ. This is one organ.
He must be there, but NASA is saying he shouldn't be.
He's not an employee of NASA. It's really not up to NASA or any other party whether he's there or not. He's an employee of the commission. What we expect from the commission is to deliver a credible election. Who, how, that is really their business. What we have given them the duty on, independently. They are an independent, constitutionally supported and protected entity. We expect them to deliver.
Let's cross over to the independence of the Constitution. After the ruling, NASA were very clear saying that they're not going to get into any election with IEBC as it is constituted. The chair goes ahead, makes changes, comes up with some committees, about 6 individuals, and then Jubilee also objected those names, saying they're partisan. So where's the independence of this commission? At a time when they're preparing to meet both Jubilee and NASA representatives on Tuesday, I believe.
Isn't that what I mentioned earlier? That there is this continuous to and fro of posturing between Jubilee and NASA. The critical thing to remember in our setup is that politically we are more or less institutionalized deceit, whereby a person says this thing and does this next day. What I would like to see is a situation whereby IEBC and the two parties, if they're going to sit down, they put the voter at the center of it, and they put the country that is carrying the voter at the center of it. We know that they have their own tactics, their own strategies on how to win an election. But what to me as a voter is absolutely disgusting is the level of disrespect for the voter, the level of disrespect for the country, the level of disrespect for the constitution, whereby individuals have decided that what is important to them precedes everything else that matters to us. And I think that's one thing I would urge them to take on and effectively deal with, so that I am Wanjikui's, Akechi's in the middle of this discussion.
And Abdikadir, I'm sure you'll agree with me. It seems at this moment IEBC has been highly politicized, up to the level, you know, some commissioners are seen to be pro-Jubilee, the others was being seen as pro-NASA. So with this kind of setup, will they be seen as non-partisan?
So really, our problem is the politics. I agree with Prof on that score. When you really attack the institution, when you focus so much attention that is negative, nobody is really praising them. That much negative attention, institutions will crack. They're human beings. If they're on the headlines every day, believe you me, they will question each other. But this is really the time for them to stand up, to have a backbone, and to deliver. The Constitution didn't say IEBC, so long as it gets support from NASA or Jubilee, should do this. It says IEBC must deliver. It has been given independence. It has been given a budget. It has been given all the resources they require. They don't need anybody's permission to deliver. I absolutely agree with Prof also that the center of all this should be the voter. In fact, one of the reasons I disagree with the Constitutional Court, with the Supreme Court, is that somehow, and I'm hoping to get the long form of the voter was not the center of that decision. It was the process. The process is not run by the voter. The voter goes up very early in the morning, casts he or her vote, goes back home after she has queued for several hours. Whether one clerk has signed one form or the other is really not up to the voter. And what you look out for was the voter's intent delivered. If by virtue of focusing on process, you move away from the voter's intent, then you're not really helping the process, because the process is not about IEBC. It's not even about the protagonists. It is about the voter. It's not about Jubilee or NASA. It's not about IEBC. It is the 15 million Kenyans who voted.
Yes. Well said, Prof.
Yes, I was going to say that that is one way of looking at this thing. Another way of looking at it is a very simple biological, physical, mathematical, sociological, everything, there is a cause and effect. You can't have children without parents. In this particular case, every deliverable, in this case, an election, has a process. In my business, we call it the scientific method. The scientific method defines clearly that for you to get an accurate, reliable, and dependable result that can be translated into, like biology gets applied as medicine, applied as agriculture, applied as forestry. You can't have a credible anything in the living systems which does not consider the process by which it was delivered. That's where I differ.
Now, I think, I don't know if that applies to politics for now, but let's talk about the 60 days that we have. Actually, it's 36 days now. Within the Constitution, of course, we're supposed to have 60 days before we go for a rerun. And you've talked about the headlines, the pressure these commissioners are undergoing. Let's say, hypothetically, once again, that some of these commissioners resign. What does that mean?
Well, we hope they don't, but there are rules. You see, the commission has 7 people. The quorum is 5. The chair is the chair of the commission. There is a vice chair. So there are inbuilt mechanisms to support that process. But we hope that the commission focuses on their core point, which is to deliver an election. They applied for those jobs. You see, they were not forced to take up the jobs. They applied for those jobs and went through a very difficult process. They delivered an election. Contrary to most perception, we have senators in office, we have governors in office, we have MCAs in office from both sides of the political divide who are there courtesy of the processes and the actions of the IEBC. Essentially, they are fruits of the same tree.
Yes.
So while we castigate IEBC, we need to understand two things. One, they have already delivered 5 of the 6 elections. Number 2, even on the 6th one, the Supreme Court said they should deliver if the Supreme Court had a problem, nothing was easier. If they were courageous enough to take the first step, nothing would have been easier to say, we want the IEBC to be changed in this or the other way before they deliver the election. Coming to the process Prof talked about, our process is primarily manual.
Yes.
The problem the court dealt with, the report from the registrar, mainly dealt with the ICT. The ICT, and the focus has been on the ICT.
Yes.
So it's good to understand what was the role of ICT in our elections. Number 1 was identification. You went there, all of us voted, and you identified yourself. The second was transmission. But the vote itself was manual. You actually were given a ballot paper that was physical. You went and ticked. You didn't push a button. You went and ticked. You put it in a physical box. It was physically counted. It was not put into some machine that gave you answers. It was physically counted. And then the appeal court, in the Maina Kiai case, said the ballots should be counted at the polling station, and the result at the polling station is final. So at the polling station, we had final answers. By the time this transmitted to Bomas, whatever issues that arose essentially did not temper with the will of the people. So that's why I am not worried about the physical process. The ICT process, in our opinion, was not substantial enough to impact on the will of the people.
Prof, before I come to you and ask you whether we're going to trust this commission as it is currently constituted for them to conduct the rerun, that is on October 17th, we'll take a very short break, but when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation at a time when, IEBC got a very terrible week, with those mails and counter-mails, memos rather, leaking from the commission. We'll continue this conversation right here on Checkpoint on KTN News. Don't go too far. We'll be right back.